Still not recording? Slow? All good? Okay. Welcome, councillors, staff, members of the gallery. I declare the meeting open at 6:01 p.m. Can I ask you please to be upstanding for the council prayer? Lord, we humbly beseech thee to vouchsafe thy blessing on this council, direct and prosper its deliberations for the advancement of this area and the true welfare of its people. Amen. I note there were no speakers for the public forum. I acknowledge the Wongal people who are the traditional custodians of the land and pay my respects to elders both past and present. I would ask that Councillor Wu Koshet, who is caring from home, is asked for leave to be via video link. It's been moved by Councillor Manor, seconded by Councillor Hull. Put the motion. All those in favour, those against, declare that be accepted and carried. I note there are no apologies. I remind councillors of their oath of affirmation under their office under section 223A of the Local Government Act. A reminder that our council meetings are live streamed for the purpose of promoting public transparency, and they can be viewed on YouTube or via the council website. Do I have any declarations of interest? I note there are no declarations of interest. Do I have any declarations of political donations? I note there are no declarations of political donations. I've got a mover for the minutes for the council meeting held on Tuesday the 30th of June 2026, moved by Councillor Hull, seconded by Councillor Esper. Put the motion. All those in favour, those against, to declare that carried unanimously. We'll just go into the minutes. I'll start with the first one, which you received late, so apologies for that. It happened quickly this afternoon because it came to our attention that the New South Wales government, via Transport for New South Wales, is providing funding for local councils to integrate shared e-bikes and micro-mobility devices into the active transport network through dedicated infrastructure and education. Recently I went to, and I won't read it all, it's there. If you need a moment to read, please do so. But I think it's really important with the government. I believe they're releasing $6.6 million odd over the next 3 years. They're grants for up to $200,000 at a time. And my minute is that council endorsed the submission of applications to the New South Wales Sharing Scheme grant program for up to $200,000 to deliver shared device parking infrastructure and education activities. To the General Manager, be authorised to execute all necessary documentation associated with the grant application and subsequent funding deed. And that 3, that a report be put back to council with the outcome of the investigation and the grant application. Obviously, some really good opportunities. At the moment, there's no real place to have the line, like I'll call them the line bikes, but there are 3 providers, e-bikes. You probably noticed there are some instances where those bikes are fallen over in the streets and so forth. The government has been working very closely with councils to empower us through the Act to be able to take action. I went to a bit of a summit from Transport from New South Wales and some of their officers and the Assistant Minister in the New South Wales Parliament a few months back. They spoke about these issues and they're listening to some of the ideas that council is putting forward, such as fines, such as allowing councils to control an area where the e-bikes can go into, for example, especially if we're having an event. Extra charges and fees for e-bikes. If there are parking stations, they'll be designated to those stations, so you need to drop them off there, otherwise you get charged an extra fee. I believe part of the funding arrangement too is that 80 cents for each ride will be collected by the state government, of which 20 cents is provided to council as a fee. And I think we're expecting probably somewhere in the order of about $15,000 per annum. The state government obviously is collecting funds, which are then handing out grants for some of these stations. So what will that mean? It'll allow our staff, for example, to set up a parking station somewhere next to Croydon Station, for example, and then you might have one in Burwood Station, you might have one in Enfield, you might have one at Croydon Park, and it'll really go off the data that will show where the majority of the connections are happening. So does anyone, do any of the councillors have any questions?
Yes. Look, thank you, Mr. Mayor, for that update of sorts on where the state government is at in respect of, I mean, the problem with e-bikes is the lack of regulation, in my opinion, as you just alluded to. You know, we have, I mean, there's a oblique reference, I guess, in this motion to the problem of e-bike littering around the area. I mean, at least 2 of them have been dumped on my street alone, but that's no exception to the general practice, it seems, of just dumping them everywhere on the sides of streets, on footpaths, etc. And not to mention there are various safety concerns that residents have raised with me about e-bikes. You know, the apparent neglect by users of these vehicles to observe proper safety procedures, such as wearing helmets, for example, and the injuries that are caused by excessive speed of, you know, the riders of these vehicles, and the general lack of regulation. I mean, I take it that this, you know, is attempting to address the problem of littering of these vehicles by providing shared parking facilities. But what we really need is, I think, regulation and proper controls, as you alluded to, rather than, you know, shared parking schemes, in my opinion. You know, they need to be removed completely until such a regulatory regime is provided by the state government. And you know, any updates in regards to when this scheme is going to be introduced, was going to be consulted with through councils and introduced through Parliament would be very welcome, in my opinion. But I'd like to see a pausing of these kinds of schemes until we know where we're at in terms of regulation, and that can only be done, as you've referred to, by the state government empowering councils within that scheme to, you know, impose fines, etc.
Thanks, Councillor Hull. Noted. Is there any other questions? Councillor Mann?
I actually support this motion. I mean, education is so important. This is a new concept. Sure, having a parking location where they can actually park their bike is a very important part. I mean, instead of just throwing it on the grass. So I support it fully.
Thanks, Councillor Mann. I might just, on the question you asked, Councillor Hull, I'll just note the minute is dealing with a submission so we can actually get some grant funding. Otherwise, we could miss out. That's why the urgency of that. There are issues with the bike scheme. I get that. And, you know, council is very, can I say, aware of some of the issues that are happening out on the strip. I believe at the moment there is no regulation for council to not opt in to the scheme. So what we are getting from the state government, and I can't remember, I think the regulation may have come in or it's about to come in. I think Mr. Cole will provide a date. I think, do you know when it does come in, Ryan?
They haven't actually, so it's been through Parliament, so an amendment to the road transport and other legislation's been through Parliament. I understand it should be coming in the next 3 months or so.
Okay, so probably by the next in the next half of the year. But in saying that, at the moment, council doesn't have any regulatory control to ban the bikes, stop the bikes, remove the bikes, I believe, unless they're in a dangerous situation, like a bit like the shopping trolleys. In saying that, though, I understand, from my understanding, the government is going to empower council with those powers. Part of the important change, though, is now working with the e-bike companies. So, as Councillor Manor mentioned, on an education program, and empowering councils through a system that we will now be able to control, and also allowing for infringement through their own app systems. For example, if I pick up a bike from an e-bike parking station at Croydon, for example, if we had one there, and rode it and left it in Ethel Street, sorry, I probably shouldn't have mentioned that street. I left it on Burwood Road, somewhere that's in an unrestricted park, or on Lucas Road or wherever, and that bike is controlled to actually have to be dropped off, I will then get charged an extra fee as part of that. I'm not sure I can't remember from the sort of summit I was sitting in on, or the presentation, if part of that infringement fee comes back to council. I'm not sure, I can't remember. But there are a new fee standard in there as well that's now making and compelling the e-bike companies to I guess pretty much be regulated, whereas currently they're unregulated. So that's the short of it. And it will mean that they will now have to pay a fee also to council, which will be put into a scheme. I think once the other thing is, we'll be able to have, the other important part of this is we'll be able to have to then control where the e-bikes move. For example, if we've got a festival on Burwood Road and we want to ban e-bikes for the day on Burwood Road, we'll be able to log in on a system that we'll now have access to, which will allow us to switch a map area and map out Burwood Road, and it just means the e-bikes won't work in that vicinity. So that's the type of regulation the government is introducing, which is compelling the e-bike operators to get on board and now work with councils and government if they want to continue to have the e-bikes across Sydney.
Sorry, may I just ask a question, just
Yes.
arising from your remarks? What you've indicated, Mr. Mayor, is that state government's contemplating introduction of fees and or fines of persons who leave them in place that have not been authorised to be left. I'll just clarify. That's from what I understand. So from what I understand is there won't be, it might not necessarily be a fine, it'll be an added fee that you pay, or an infringement fee, if you have not returned a bike to the designated area. Not all of those. For example, there are streets that may still have your one or two bikes that you're not going to have a parking station in that street, for example. So in the suburbs, you may have some bikes, but you're hoping to get the majority of bikes and travels, and this is part of the strategy work that will be undertaken as part of this program, is to then work out where you combine the large number of bikes that are located in an area. For example, if there are a large cohort of or group of e-bikes in Croydon, for example, there's 10 of them around Croydon Station, so it makes sense to put a station there. If there's then the same scattered across parts of the Burwood Town Centre, you might have 2 or 3 spots there. It might be the same in Enfield. Does that mean it will stop the 1 or 2 bikes that might be on Lucas Road? No, those bikes might still be there. It just depends. It'll give us better regulation if they've been dumped or tossed over or pulled, for us to be able to collect, clean and recover. And sorry, can I just ask also, will those, I'm happy to support a shared scheme like this, particularly if the government's going to pay for it. But will those fees, are they going to be enforceable at law? Or are they just going to be fees that the council says, well, you have to pay a fee, here's the letter, and if they're not paid, well, you know,
From what I understand, from what I understand, I haven't, and from memory, because it was a number of months back, and obviously from the briefings I've received from the general manager and Ryan today, is if you pick up a bike which is been programmed to then drop off at Burwood, which means you need to put it in a parking spot in Burwood Town Centre, or a parking station, if you want to call it. If you don't return it in that part of the centre, for example, it will then continue to charge you. So there's, I guess there's an incentive from the user to stop being charged by returning it to the appropriate place. I guess what the scheme is hoping to do is, for example, I think there was something like 20,000 e-bikes from one company in Sydney, for example. In Burwood, I think we had 120 so far. Out of the 120 that we've got in Burwood, I guess you're not going to control the whole 120, but we want to be able to have better regulation. For example, if one's busted, it's fallen over, it's in, someone's, across the footpath or sitting on a road in a dangerous spot, we can then pick up the bike. And I think there's a ability for us to then infringe the operator, I believe. I need to get back to my memory on that one, but I think this is where it's heading. The other thing is you might still have 30 bikes scattered across the LGA in streets because there are people that are using them in those streets. For example, in Young Street in Croydon, I walked past a particular house which looks, I guess, is the shared house, where you'll see 4 or 5 e-bikes parked at the front of that. So they're obviously using the e-bike and it's working, right? The thing is, it's about ensuring that you get the majority of them in those parking stations. So it's about having some order with the other 90 or 80 e-bikes. Whereas now you've got no order for the whole 120.
Sorry, just arising from those remarks, whether the fee is going to be imposed against the operator of the e-bikes rather than the user. I take it
it's the user.
Oh, it is the user. Okay, the user. So there will be a system as part of the regulatory regime. There will be a system of registration by which councils can enforce fees and fines, and the bikes can be removed and destroyed if necessary.
I'm not sure on removed and it currently works via an app on your phone, and the app will charge you a fee based on a distance, and then obviously if you don't park the bike back to where the app will show you, then you'll continually be charged. Now, if you want to call that a fine or an infringement, it's an extra charge, right? So in my view, it is like a fine or an infringement. They might call it a continued fee. I'm not sure what they'll call it. So anyway, that's where that is at. In relation to the locations and where the stations will be placed and so forth, I think the priority at this stage is to apply for the funding so we don't miss out on funding. And then obviously there will be a process that Ryan and the general manager and our traffic people will in the department will actually come back with a report. I believe the August or October meeting where August or September meeting where we'll have some more detail.
Sorry, just one further question, Mr. Mayor. Can council be provided an update on progress of, we were just advised that there will be some sort of regulatory regime coming into law in 3 months or thereabouts.
I think it's online.
It is online? Okay.
I believe so. There's been a lot of talk, but yeah, we can happy to send a link.
was, it'd be good to have some sort of a briefing about this as to how it's going to work and council's, role and powers and controls and powers of control and enforcement in this regime. I'm unfamiliar with it at the moment, and I would like to look like more information about this if possible before we support, shared integrated parking regimes and the like.
Well, and I'll probably just wrap it up with this comment. I'll put it on a vote because it'll come up again, and we'll have the opportunity, and maybe it'll allow councillors to do some background work in looking at the issue. But the minute calls for a submission for applying for a grant program. If you want to look at the technicalities of it, it's the alternative is take no action, apply for no money, have no stations, and continue to have what you've got. It's not as if there is any regulation at the moment where we can remove. So it's about creating that order and supporting a new regulation. I'll put the minute. All those in favour? Those against? I declare that carried unanimously. And I note your concerns, Councillor, but some of those are very valid. So we'll address those at the August meeting. The next minute is the M1226, which is the Artificial Intelligence Smart Traffic Management Pilot. I'm not going to read the minute again. I might just note that I'm calling for that the Mayor write to the New South Wales Minister for Transport and the General Manager to Transport for New South Wales, seeking the selection of the Burwood Town Centre as a pilot location for the implementation and trial of artificial intelligence, AI-powered traffic signals and intelligent pedestrian crossing technology, recognising Burwood's role as a major strategic centre and its suitability for demonstrating innovative smart city transport solutions that improve pedestrian safety, accessibility and network efficiency. Any questions? This is really about trying to get some government support in and around AI technology and where it stands. I believe there's a city in Brisbane at the moment which is trialling the AI on a set of traffic lights. I think there might be one city in maybe Western Sydney that is possibly undertaking a trial as well. I think it's really important that we start putting Burwood's name forward, especially if the government starts looking. I mean, AI is starting to filter into a lot of, a big part of, I guess, people's workplaces, homes and so forth. It's important too if you could have, for example, AI-powered traffic signals where, if there's not necessarily a large build-up of cars or traffic on one direction, the other direction continues flowing. For example, if a pedestrian accesses that, how many pedestrians have? So it just gives you the whole look at the traffic situation. Some of the, traffic signals that could be looked at is the corner of Victoria Street and Shaftesbury Road, for example, along Westfields, or even the one on Burwood Road and Railway Parade. Any questions? Councillor Hull?
Just a quick question, Mr Mayor. I'm unfamiliar with the details of the Parramatta trial. However, from the mayoral minute as stated, there's just so I have an understanding of the basic idea behind this. It seems to be geared towards a more real-time response to pedestrian movements.
Not just pedestrian and cars.
And cars as well. So, at present, when a pedestrian comes to a crossing, a traffic light crossing, and presses the button, it makes little or no difference to the actual timing of the lights. But there seems to be a suggestion in this proposal that AI could intervene in that. There could be some pre-programmed AI bot, governing the traffic light timing, which could respond in real time to pedestrian movements and traffic flows and making a judgment, as to whether pedestrians can cross the road more quickly, perhaps.
I think there's some major intersections in Burwood now which probably need to be elevated to some form of a scatter crossing where you cross all at once. I think where I see this more sort of heading is, for example, of an evening you might be driving through Burwood Road and there's no cars at the intersection of Railway Parade, and then the lights go red at Burwood Road and they go green on Railway Parade. There's no cars have crossed. You sort of just stop the movement for no reason, for example. Or you might be on Railway Parade with no cars crossing along Burwood Road late at night and you're on a red light waiting for the lights to change so you can cross. AI would pick up that there's no cars coming in the other direction, so it'll give you a green signal to go so you're not sitting there for minutes. The other opportunities might mean, for example, at a peak time coming out of Victoria Street, which we've seen in Westfields, where everyone's trying to leave at the same time, and getting out onto Victoria Street, it's giving priority to that traffic signal to allow cars to filter out quicker and maybe bang on to or continue on with the other sets of lights. So you're not stop-starting, getting out of that intersection to get to another red light. So it's managing that process.
It seems like an innovation which could well assist with traffic flows, particularly on Burwood Road, where some solution is required to enhancing, improving traffic flows. But if it can improve traffic flows and balance that with needs of pedestrians, I think it would be an innovative development. So I'm happy to support this.
Thanks. Yeah. Thanks, Councillor. Any other speakers? Yeah, Councillor.
Can I also add, I think we've already established Burwood as being a council that gets the work done. So by supporting or writing to be part of that pilot, I think it also speaks to the work that comes, the quality work that comes out of the council and the brilliant work that the team does. And we all know that AI is part of our everyday lives. It's not just a buzzword that's happening. It's really, seeped into our everyday life, whether it's at work, at home. And to be part of something as piloting as this, I think it would put Burwood up on the map. Like, we're already ahead. We are known to trial things. We have that trust. So I think it speaks to that as well. So definitely speak to it and support it.
Thanks, Councillor Batson.
Yes.
Any other Councillor Rukoshit? Sorry, you've got your hand up.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I'm wondering if there's any scope for also us to partner with, for example, Westfield, because not only is it when you pile out onto the street, the cars around Westfield, but also when you're within Westfield, knowing which exits are easier to exit or enter from, for example. So having that partnership with them could make the whole process easier than just doing the streets surrounding Westfield. So I'm wondering whether we could write that as part of the letter to the Minister.
This is in relation to the trial, but I will note in answering your question, we have called, I believe Jackie's speaking to the GMZA, and we're trying to organise a meeting with Westfields. I know the staff have been meeting with them. This is more about, and we will update them that we're sort of trialling or looking at the AI. One of the things with Westfields, just so councillors are aware, is there's a real difference in, I guess, the way they view what's happening in their car park and what the community and we view as. For them, I think it's about $1,000 they need to spend on a traffic, especially in peak times, on a traffic, an RMS officer, I think, from Transport, who sits there. Sometimes you'll see on the side of Victoria Street, there's a car parked up on the verge and the guy sitting in the car. He's actually controlling the lights. So we need to still have human interference in the signalling there to get cars flowing, which I think what this motion talks about, or this minute, is we should start replacing this with AI, which is a much cheaper outcome. The reason Westfields doesn't have that person there all the time is only putting that person there under pressure from us now during peak sort of festive season or Mother's Day or Father's Day or, an Anzac public holiday, is when he's there, it actually starts to work a lot better. On weekends, I've noticed it's working better on Saturdays now because the construction site across the road is now putting witches' hats on. I think we've proposed to put a no stopping for a section of where the buses were parking, which was creating a narrowing of Victoria Street. So it made drivers that weren't too confident to sort of get in and around those area spaces as sort of banking up a traffic. And then obviously the issue that Westfields has, which we want to sit down and speak to Westfields about, is the fact that they've got a and Burwood's become very popular. So what we're noticing is a lot of the cars that are coming into the Burwood town centre are coming from outside. So when we talk about, for example, the density or the housing in the town centre, it's not those people driving out of a unit block on Railway Parade and driving into Westfields. They're actually walking down. And we've done some surveys where the developments that we've got in our town centre, only 30% of the owners have a car in those basements. So there's two things. One is that's now giving us, should we review the amount of car parking we're allowing in those spaces, like in those developments, considering there's no cars in them, so they're getting built, adding to the cost of housing? Or two, do we push that developers, and I think this is what we've been looking at, provide more shared cars, so people who generally are using public transport on a weekend, if they do want a car, they don't need to park a car there that they only use once a month if they want to go for a trip up to the Blue Mountains or Bowral or wherever else, right? But in saying that, so Westfields, I think we need to have some more serious discussions with them. One of the great points is they've got an electronic parking system in there, Councillor Wukoshit, you mentioned. It doesn't give you a live update of where you should exit from. What's a quicker access point? I can tell you this, though, our traffic department is actually doing some modelling in and around the road network around Westfields, and where there's opportunities to actually widen or provide slip lanes, which is another turn lane, possibly direct some cars from a one-way into a two-way, which will allow some cars to spit back out onto Burwood Road travelling south, which can carry a lot more of the load rather than pushing everything onto Shaftesbury Road. Might be options, but we don't have a plan yet. They're working through that. They're looking at services. There's also opportunity, I believe, along the intersection there on Shaftesbury Road, Victoria Street East, where there could be future road widening opportunities that the staff are looking at, which some have already exist and some they could add to. So there are, but in saying that, it's quite obvious when, at the time when which is pre any of our times, that I don't think anyone who's here tonight was on council at the time when they approved the Westfields. It was a poorly designed car park and road network. Probably wasn't designed with the popularity in mind that it could grow to. And the other thing I will note also, Councillor Wukoshit, is we're also now doing a digital, not just marketing campaign, but we're updating a lot of signage for the George Street car park, the entrances. I had a brief today from the general manager and Miriam, one of our directors, about highlighting more involvement in getting cars parking in the George Street car park or Morella Street car park. There's big opportunity to pick up a lot of the cars that are coming from Stratfield to actually, instead of driving down Park Avenue, doing that dog leg into Wilga Street and parking in Westfields, to actually park in George Street and then walk through. There are some pedestrian ways that we're going to upgrade from Victoria Street, which is that closed section that takes you up past the Barmy Vietnamese sort of roll back up through to Elsie Street and John Street So that's coming as part of our laneways program. And there is going to be a calendar, which I believe council staff are investigating now, and obviously the cost of that, where we will have a fixed calendar of 3-hour free parking on dates, which will be expressed and put out. And then also the option of looking at our own residents, whether we increase the 2 pp to 3 pp parking, which then, so what we're trying to say is you don't need to go park in Westfields to shop in Westfields. You can park at some of these other parking stations without having to cross over, and then walk along our town centre, which will also, part of that will be a much more leisurable experience now, especially with the upgrade of the Wiswick upgrade to Burwood Road, which is going to green a lot of the pedestrian areas as well to make it more friendly to walk. So they're all being looked at. I'm confident we'll be able to have some more cement plans to the council by the end of the year. Councillor Hull?
Yes, just following on those remarks, Mr. Mayor, are there any plans to increase or expand those council car parks, particularly around Burwood Road? If there's going to be less parking on Burwood Road, as it seems to be envisaged, we would surely need more multi-storey car parks, for example. I mean, we already have, just car parks where you drive in and just park. There could be potential for multi-storey car parks, for example.
The car parks we do have now, Councillor, and look, that's a good question. We don't envisage to be losing a great deal of spots along Burwood Road. There might be a number. I can't give you an exact number, but I don't think it would be more than 20. But anyway, but in saying that, it's still very important, and that's still under discussion and review. There are strategic locations where you can't lose parking, for example. One of the things one of the issues that I've been speaking to our staff about is we need to model the traffic if we are going to widen some of the pedestrian ways to make sure the road network would still work. If it's going to only add to the burden of the road network, then we can't just have something look pretty and it doesn't work. So we're looking at that, and that's part of still the review process. So there's nothing been decided there. But it's a real option, because one of the things that we want to do is to continue to have, you go out onto Burwood Road now and you can just see there's more pedestrians than cars, right? And so we want to ensure that we continue to have that vibrancy. In saying that, at this stage, I don't believe, and I think the staff can come back, but I don't believe we are having an issue if we don't have enough parking in the car parks. For example, George Street is nowhere near capacity. I think it's less than 50%. So you've got something like 260 car spots there now. The problem with George Street, I think, is currently it does not sort of lead people to that car park enough. Unless you really know about it, you won't go there. One of the things that we did find is when we did some social media last year during those peak times and provided the 3-hour parking, it's now increased the usage of the George Street car park. We believe we can do even more, and we believe we can capture some of the parking in and around. Across the road from George Street too, you must remember there's a Wilson Street car park. We also have a car park just out here, so everyone will go into Emerald Square. We've got one right across the road which has capacity, which is a paid parking, which is part of the just outside of Unity Place. There's a public car park there too. So I guess part of the conversation will be with Westfields. It'll be possibly with the Anson Group that owns next door about possibly making their car park a bit more visible, and advertising that. Wilson Parking, obviously also the George Street car park. So at this stage, there's no real cry out for increased parking spaces. There may be a future opportunity, which I haven't seen anything, but I mean, if you were to look at maybe an increased parking opportunity if you wanted to in a location. It might be the Burleigh Street precinct, which, could add to part of the commuter car, some form of commuter car park for rail. But in saying that as well, I mean, it's quite an expensive cost to build car parks now, and who are you building it for? We need to make sure that if we're going to spend ratepayers' money on building a car park, that our ratepayers have the benefit of using it. It's not people coming from outside the area that our ratepayers paid for. So we just need to have that balance too. So we need to see how we manage that. And I'll just probably finish on this if there's no other questions, is we're about to spend about $3.5 million on Paisley Road doing a major upgrade and beautification work, which is a continuation of the work from Railway Parade to the Strand. Part of that will include a new public historical pathway from Croydon to Burwood on the northern side, right along the rail line, which has many cars that park there that are commuters. One of the things we are doing is part of that is for our staff to investigate who's parking there at the moment, some of the cars that are left there long term. Do we put some restrictions in? Do we open up some spaces for commuters that are on residents that live on the southern side of our electorate that actually need to drive into Burwood or Croydon? So we're looking at all those. But I just want to be conscious that if we are going to build any future car parks, unless it's a commercial car park arrangement where you pay a fee to pay back the ratepayers for funding that, otherwise the ratepayers need to have the first in option to be able to park in that. It's like a lot of people talk about building a commuter. If you build a commuter car park for Transport New South Wales and the rail line, they're the ones benefiting, and our ratepayers paid for it. It's a bit unfair, I think. It's a bit, but it doesn't say you rule it out. But we just need to be conscious of that too. Any other questions? Put them in. All those in favour? Those against, I declare that carried unanimously. And I guess my last mayoral minute is 13/26, which is to continue to advocate to the New South Wales Government for the inclusion of the Parramatta Road Light Rail Corridor in future transport strategies, infrastructure priorities and funding programs. Any planning decisions our council makes affecting Parramatta Road takes into account the opportunity and the requirements for possible future light rail infrastructure. I think it's a really important state infrastructure project that the government should really pick up on especially in this corridor. I think we will all agree it's the ugliest road strip in Sydney. It could do with a major revamp. While we do have the Burwood North Metro stop that's going to be placed there, which is great and welcomed, a light rail along Parramatta Road, which will still allow 2-lane traffic in either direction to continue. It would allow councils, there's 4 councils that share Parramatta Road up to Burwood North, which is Burwood, Canada Bay, Inner West and Sydney City. It will allow us to have better planning for future development along that strip. We haven't had any major future developments that are happening along Parramatta Road other than the one on the corner of Lucas Road and Cheltenham Road, I think, which went through a state planning proposal, I believe, not sure. But there's 3 major ones that are coming on Parramatta Road just opposite Croydon there that are on the Canada Bay site. One of them is, I think, Daycorp, which is about 1,300 apartments. There's one that's just been approved by, I think it's One Capital, which looked like something out of Dubai. And it was, I think, something in the order of 1,500 apartments. And I think there's another one that's been approved by Toga, who is the group that got approved. And these are 3. Now, could you imagine, 2,500, 3,000 apartments there? How, if they want to come into the Burwood Town Centre, how are they going to get in there? I guess one of the benefits, and I've met with a couple of these development companies that are building these that came and actually met with us here in the office because we wanted to talk to them about what are their plans to shuttle people into the Burwood Town Centre, because the last thing we need is another 1,000 cars driving in here. How can we better have connection between their residents and Burwood? Because the most likeliest place that those people are going to shop is Burwood. town centre unless they get a major upgrade or shopping centre in Five Dock, which is where they're closer to. One of the things I must say is that, for example, the Daycorp development, which gave us a bit of ease, identified to us, I think they had 30 or 40 retail spots in. So they've got a mini shopping centre in their actual development, which will have major supermarkets and so forth, which is good. So at least that means that those people won't have to be travelling far to get their groceries or to do some shopping, which is important. Any questions? Put them in. All those in favour? Those against, I declare that carried unanimously. Reports to council 48/26, which is the draft code of meeting practice, being moved by Councillor Batter, seconded by Councillor Manner. Put the motion. All those in favour, those against, declare that carried unanimously. 49/26 on page 10, being moved by Councillor Esper, seconded by Councillor Yang. Put the motion. All those in favour, those against, declare that carried unanimously. 50/26, which is agency information guides, being moved by Councillor Batter, seconded by Councillor Esper. Put the motion. All those in favour, those against, declare that carried unanimously. Item 51/26, which is the investment reports, being moved by Councillor Wu Koshet, seconded by Councillor Yang. Put the motion. All those in favour, those against, declare that carried unanimously. 52/26, draft civic recognition condolences small donations policy, being moved by Councillor Yang, seconded by Councillor Batter. Put the motion. All those in favour, those against, declare that carried unanimously. Now, the next item, which is Merrill Minute 14/26, General Manager's Performance Review. It's important that the above item be considered in closed session to the exclusion of the press and public in accordance with the Section 10A2A of the Local Government Act 1993, as it involves personal matters concerning particular individuals. I'll ask any objections. No objections. Been moved by Councillor Yang, seconded by Councillor Manner. We go into closed session and put the motion. All those in favour, those against, declare that carried unanimously. Reminder to keep your microphones off. I'm not sure how Councillor